Dear friends, this is Mutlu Köylüoğlu from Citizens Basic Income Research, Development, Culture and Dissemination Society, Istanbul, Turkey. Tonight, our topic is the impacts of COVID-19 and UBI discussions. We thought we should have the opportunity to talk about this topic with senior UBI advocates from different corners of the world. And it's our pleasure to host our dear friends, Alexander Davala from Netherlands, Hilde Latour from Netherlands, Karl Widerquist from USA, Enno Schmidt from Switzerland, Helmo Pape from Austria, and Sarath Davala from India. You are all welcome. Some of the main issues we are planning to discuss are the impacts of COVID-19 and UBI discussions, ongoing UBI-related petitions at different countries, also international petitions, the emergency UBI concept, existing proposals by some governments, their similarities with UBI and also discrepancies from UBI, also the issues to be considered when communicating with governments and political parties, and in general, the public awareness issues, campaigns, and any other advices. Of course, I'm sure the issues will not be limited with these. The concept is 5 minutes to each participant during the first round and an additional 2 more minutes during the second round. Let's start then. We will start with our dear friend from Netherlands, Alexander Davala.
Another Google Trend search, and then you can see that basic income is now on top of a lot of people's mind, more than ever before. And that's happening the last 4 or 5 years, but especially since the coronavirus, you see a new peak in awareness and discussions with basic income. Basic income has, of course, 5 elements, and it's difficult politically to achieve all 5 at the same time, but in the end, that's our goal. It's a periodic payment, unconditional, individual, universal to everybody, and it's high enough to live from. Especially 2 conditions are very important: unconditional, periodic, and high enough to live from. And what we see now is the emergency UBI, which is happening now in the US, which is happening in a province in Korea, which is happening in Hong Kong, in Singapore and Macau. The 3 of those 5 elements are fulfilled. It's high enough to live from, and it's basically for everybody, and most of the time also universal. Of course, it's only on one-time payments. In that sense, it's not periodic. But because of this resemblance with universal basic income, more and more people are now discussing it. And I think it's our task to start petitions, to start awareness. We can't have a demonstration. We had this demonstration the 19th of September, sorry, the 26th of October last year, and we're planning a new one in September. But for the time being, it's difficult to organize a physical demonstration outside, so we have to do it online and digital. And we should emphasize again and again that the basic income is those 5 elements. But we should say yes and greet the emergency UBI, which is popping up here and there, because it's important to see that it is one movement. And if you go back to the start of the neoliberalism, the end of the 70s, the beginning of the 80s, then it was the theme that it's the markets which will do it. The unions have to go down, the state has to be small. That was the dominant item, the dominant political philosophy for more than 40 years. And because of the financial and economic crisis, 2008, 2015, a lot of people are now doubting that dominant neoliberal philosophy. And you see that UBI is coming up. People are considering this as an alternative to the way things are functioning. And I think this coronavirus crisis will mean that more and more people are saying, yes, UBI could be the alternative, at least one of the milestones as an alternative for neoliberal politics as we have known it for the last 40, 50 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexander. Thank you for your contributions. So The next participant is Hilde Latour. Hilde, word is yours.
I'm unmuted, yes. Okay, well, you know, during the global COVID-19 emergency, when human existence, well, feels at stake, there is no time for bureaucracy. And we see a unity of effort without a unity of command. And what I mean by that is that we see collaborations between people, organizations, and governments that are extraordinary and spontaneously organized. Initiatives to support the health professionals so they can continue to treat the patients. It turns out that it is built into our DNA to unite. It is built into our DNA to co-create. And when human economy and traveling almost comes to a standstill, we now know what happens with nature. Rivers clear up, the air cleans up, forests thrive, and birds sing in the cities. All forms of innovations are combined, and people spread the word and manifest and co-create. And the lockdown measures taken to flatten the curve of coronavirus, however, are going to result in layoffs on a scale and at a pace the world has never seen before. And at the same time, many jobs will be replaced by robots almost instantly because of social distancing policies. So to prevent an even more severe secondary disaster, more and more countries are implementing or discussing an emergency basic income for all their citizens, no strings attached. There is no time for bureaucracy. All countries should ensure all individuals access to their basic needs. And the easiest, fastest, and cheapest way to do that is through an unconditional emergency basic income for all. An emergency basic income is inevitable. And we must do everything we can to use this momentum and empower transforming communities or start one ourselves. With an emergency basic income in the pocket, we will see more unity of effort without a unity of command in many different fields. Basic income is here to stay because it supports exactly that. Basic income restores personal freedom and community connectivity, participation, and governance. So let's embrace it. Extraordinary challenges require unconventional responses. Thanks.
Thank you, Hilde. Very kind of you. So next contribution is from Karl Widerquist. Dear Karl, word is yours.
Okay, I'm unmuted. Well, first, I want to say the fact that we're talking about emergency UBI is a result and a reason that we should all, that everyone in the UBI movement, everybody who's said anything good about UBI in the last 15 years should congratulate themselves. It is the result of the UBI movement. It is a result of the much greater awareness and getting this idea on the table and putting out well thought out ideas about how this can work, that we're even talking about this now. In 2001 and again in 2008, the United States went into pretty substantial recessions, especially 2008, of course. 2001 was fairly bad. And both of those times,
we lost Karl.
UBI than the United States has done on economic scale, on this kind of scale. And
Unfortunately, we couldn't hear your last few sentences. Would you please repeat?
Okay.
Something was broken in the line.
Okay. In 2001 and 2008, we had substantial recessions in the US, and the Bush administration was president both of those times. The Bush administration and Congress agreed to give an almost universal payment. It unfortunately left out the people who needed it most, but it included a very lot of people, and it was the closest thing we've had. It was essentially a one-time emergency UBI. Nobody, except for it had some conditions, it was close to it. It was closer than the US has gotten at a national scale to UBI, I think, ever, as far as I know. And except in like the US big newsletter, or, you know, a few BN things, nobody was talking about this as having anything to do with basic income. It was not in the political idea. There was no, the 2008 recession was really bad, and people worldwide were not talking about an emergency UBI. And I think if you did a search of what people were talking about back then, I don't think the phrase emergency basic income would come up. But now it comes up, and people are talking about it in a positive way, and they're even trying to steal our rhetoric, trying to do something that's not quite an emergency UBI, but calling it a UBI. That is the success that this movement has built in the last 15 years. Now, we need to embrace this. A UBI, an emergency UBI, is not the lifelong UBI that we all want, but it is a temporary UBI. It is a UBI, you know, a UBI is usually presumed it's going to be lifelong, but a temporary UBI can be a temporary UBI. We recognize all the similarities, and the word emergency or temporary tells you the difference. So we know UBI is this, temporary or emergency UBI is this. We're not confusing people by using these languages, and we're helping them understand that this idea that some countries are probably going to actually try out. I don't think the US will, unfortunately, but I think some countries are going to try this out during coronavirus, that they are essentially trying out a form of basic income. And what we learn from that is way more important than we learn from any experiments, for reasons you'll find in my book on experiments. Now, of course, there are things we won't learn about it because it's different times, and the fact that it's temporary and it's at a time when we're expecting big unemployment anyway. You know, a lot of the things we'll want to know about a permanent UBI, we won't learn from this, but a lot of the things we will. How does it help the very least advantage? How does it affect the direct effects of poverty and homelessness and inequality, and how does it affect the indirect effects? We'll learn some things about that, and this will help UBI in the future. Now, and this is also a chance that the UBI model can help people. We need to show that this model helps people. Now, but to press for an emergency UBI, it's got to be a real UBI. If you say a UBI, it's going to be a UBI, but for everybody who filed a tax return last year. Well, the homeless didn't file tax returns last year, most of them. And so they're going to be left out. If you do it, okay, it's going to be UBI for everybody except billionaires. Well, a lot of the homeless can't prove they're not a billionaire. They're not good at filling out forms. You know, you got to find it. You know, in the US, we need to do it to every citizen, everyone with a social security number, whether they're a citizen or not. That's the kind of way, that's what we need to be pushing for. The governments are going to want to put on conditions or means testing. And when they do that, they're going to slow it down, and it's not going to help as much. You know, UBI can be put in right away, and it's going to help a lot of people right away. So pushing for an emergency UBI is really important in a true UBI model. And I think some countries are going to do that. I think we're going to win this in some countries. And I've never said that about almost anything before. Oh, and I'm done.
Thank you, Karl. Thank you very much. So next contribution, dear Enno Schmidt. Please, word is yours.
Yeah, okay. So I think the phenomenon is that so many things can change so quickly. We never believed that before. So we are always told that the world is like it is and we have to fit in. And suddenly, by a little virus, everything can be different. And I think this is the experience. People are currently, they are still shocked about it, but then this is an experience, and it is an experience globally. So it's a global community, and everything can be different. This is, I guess, the first point. And in this situation that so many people now start to talk about an unconditional basic income, so many newspapers everywhere and politicians and so on are looking to the idea of an unconditional basic income. That is, like Karl said, the result of the movement that is running since 20 years now. So what we have currently is not a UBI, that is helicopter money, if you want to give it a name, but in a way, the experience will be for so many people to get money just given. So not with this exchange of to give and to get, but just one direction. And that is like a UBI is, so that we can give money to people without requiring any specific behavior or whatever. And this is the idea, this is a new idea. And I think so if we would have already an unconditional universal basic income, our society would be much more resilient and stable. And this is not the last crisis or the last catastrophe. We will have more of that, more global crises by climate change and so on and so on. And I think this is an example, and people can start thinking about it more serious, that it is necessary that we provide people with a basic income, cash, that the percentage of money earned by gainful employment is shrinking, is not everything, and that everybody has an unconditional income in the way of a basic income. So that makes a society much more stable when the next crises are coming. And I think this is the big step for basic income in this crisis, that we can see it makes sense and it is necessary for the society to step away from this ancient understanding that everybody has to fulfill any function and then he or she gets the right to live, otherwise not. An unconditional basic income or an income is the right to live, and an unconditional basic income is this, like Hilde said, that we understand that we are a human society and that the basic has to be given to everybody, not because of sentimental, freaky ideas, but because this is necessary for our century now. Thank you.
Thank you, Enno. So, dear Helmo, are you online? Word is yours, please.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I'm pretty honored to be in this group because I'm not a researcher, I'm not a politician, I'm just an activist from a very little country. And we're in Austria seeing very hard measures tackling the coronavirus crisis. At the moment, we are not allowed to gather in more than 5 people, large groups. All the businesses are closed, and we are facing, of course, besides serious health issues, we are very close to Italy, where it's hit hardest. We are in the economic issue. And I myself, I'm really struck by the speed of change of top topics. You know, nobody's talking about climate change anymore. Nobody's talking about refugees drowning in the Mediterranean. We're now all in this health issue. And second of all is, oh my gosh, where will my money come from if my job is lost? And yeah, this really burning question is fueling the discussion about a universal basic income, because as Enno mentioned it, we're all pretty sure this won't be the last crisis we'll ever face. So what are we going to do when the next crisis hits? Will we still put on conditions? Okay, you have to file for a you have to file for a emergency payment, and you have to prove what you have earned last year and stuff like that. So the beauty of the unconditionality will come visible more and more, because we are totally fed up with bureaucracy trying to prove that we have to have the first, let's say, $1,000 a month just for living on. So I think we will have some form of emergency basic income or emergency money being thrown at us just to keep the economy running. But nonetheless, this will help us put the real thing closer to realization. Thank you.
Thank you, Helmo. And dear Sarath, word is yours.
Okay, you have unmuted me. Okay, many things, and I think we are in a lockdown. Like, we can't move out of our house, and we are like locked down for 21 days, and that's fine, because in any case, I have been living in isolation for a very long time, doing my work from home. So that's not, but I think let me just start by saying that I completely believe what you started with, Ali, about the classical, what we cherish, the concept of universal basic income. Let me say that I completely believe in all the 5 or 6 characteristics of universal basic income, including high enough, which possibly is a Eurocentric thing, because it's articulated in Europe, but even in India, I'm trying to push for high enough. And the fact that it should be a legal right and a human right and blah, 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 and all that. I completely believe in that. Okay, and having said that, let me say that when I am dealing with the middle class, which is the most wretched of the lot in our society, and politicians who are the most intelligent, who understand what we say, but they do what they want to do, all kinds of people, we have to go by the local narrative that is there. In India, what narrative is there? I have to travel with that narrative, but at the same time, try to push this idea. So in the last couple of years, I think the idea itself has come to some stage that, as some of my friends have already said, that when this issue came, I think a lot of people have started using that same terminology, which was like, it was not something that was very popular. But suddenly people started saying that, oh, maybe this is a good idea. Now, I would say all the issues that are there now, like in terms of, on the one hand, we have a health crisis. On the other hand, we have the economic crisis coming out of that. Coming not just out of that, but also because of the lockdown. Because of the lockdown, a huge number of, I mean, in the case of India, it's millions of people are just out of work because of the lockdown, not because of the virus. But then virus has to be stopped by some measures which have economic implications. So we are kind of caught up in a situation like that. Now, all these issues have been there before. It's nothing new. Now we have an economy, we have a situation of people, reality on steroids. Now, when it comes, like, everything is out in the open now, all the vulnerabilities, all the weaknesses of our system are now out in the open, that we don't have testing facilities, we have no social security system, we are blah, blah, blah. All that is out in the open. Now, when we are now trying to say, we have been saying last 1 week that please give an unconditional emergency basic income to all the people who are suffering, who are going to suffer. Now, all this game is not going to be over in the next 2 weeks in India. Definitely not. It's going to be like next 12 weeks. It's too serious. So we are telling the government, don't see it as next 2 weeks or 3 weeks. It's going to be a long haul for us. Now, put your things in place. Now, today, our finance minister gives something like, a pittance in the name of cash transfer. Now, anyway, but I think we will go on with this. Now, the point is that this is a moment we have to keep talking about universal basic income in the name of emergency basic income, because emergency basic income is also unconditional. It's also universal. It's because it's an idiom, it's a language we are using at this moment. And I think last night I was sitting, and the whole night I was sitting and watching videos of all African countries. I think it's now spreading in Africa, in Kenya, in Uganda, in Tanzania, in South Africa. I think it's just a matter of time before it's going to go. So that's why I think we have now started, a group of us, we started a website where we want to give resources to every country where they can go and demand with their governments that please give an emergency basic income to everyone. I think this is the moment. I think we all have to do that. I think each epicenter, now I think it's Europe is epicenter, tomorrow it could be US is going to be the epicenter, then India could be the epicenter. I think this is the idea. In fact, I've been arguing with my people here that transferring food grains is not easy in a country like this. You can't give grains to people. Give them money, regulate the shops that are selling grains, let them go and buy the grains from those shops, rather than the government trying to transport grains from one point to another. Anyway, I'm sorry, I think I'm going on and on. The point is that I think this is really for the basic income movement. I think what the hard work that has been done by so many people in the last 5 years, and of course 30 years, I think it's now becoming a policy option in many, many places. And I think the unconditional part is the most important. And I think as a basic income community, we have to keep shouting from the global rooftops that this is what you should be doing. Give the damn money to those people. So instead of using the wretched word called poverty, I want to use the word called deprivation. People who are deprived. Now the people who are deprived are on steroids. You can see them glaring on, you can see them every street corner. They don't have jobs, they don't have work, they don't have income. It's so graphic now. Now I think it's, at least now, I'm sure at least the thinking classes, the middle classes, the writing classes, the chattering classes, see what this idea means, that just give this cash to people unconditionally. I think that is the force we have to bring into this movement. Ali, don't worry about the purity of the concept. I don't think any of us will compromise on the purity of the concept, but I think we are in a war economy. I think we have to now push these people who never wanted to listen to us. Now they are listening. Let's push it. Let's push it on their face and say, this is what we want, and do it.
Thank you, Sarath. I would like to go to the second round, but after Sarath's contributions, I would like to ask two small questions to each of you. Maybe you can comment about this. The first one is, the emergency UBI discussions are very hot these days, and I believe we have to be very, very careful during these discussions. The first point is, let's remember the precariat concept. According to the definition, the precariat is a social class formed by people suffering from precarity, which is a condition of existence without predictability or security, blah, blah, blah. It goes on like this. But there we were talking about a class of people. But I guess now, not only the people, but also all the companies, governments, central banks, they are all precarious. So everything is very, very brittle. This was the first issue. The second thing is that I would like to mention is about the application period of the emergency UBI. UBI should not only be for the so-called emergency period. And I guess, and I believe, and I think it will be like this, the emergency conditions most probably will be the normal conditions of the coming, the near future. What do you think about these 2 points? There were 2 small questions, but I would like to continue with, again, starting with Alexander. Alexander, would you please?
2 minutes. I want to say 2 things. Just a week ago, we had the Minister of Economics who said, I'm going to save the national champions, the KLM, our national airline company, we're going to save. And the small people, the so-called independent professionals, and we have 1 million of them out of a workforce of 10 million, he says, well, they chose to be entrepreneur, they get no money, they will go down the drain. Within 2 days, those people had signatures signed, 200,000 signatures in 2 days. So they organized themselves. And then only half a week ago, the government said, okay, this very group, this independent, those 1 million, which are now basically coming on the dole without any money, they will get 1,500 euros a month. No condition attached. They may have a partner, they may have a house, doesn't matter. They will get this 1,500 euros. So that's a kind of emergency basic income for this group. Okay, it's not everybody in society, but it's very important that everybody can see that it works. It will be probably stopped after the lockdown is over. But it's important to realize those people have had this experience and the whole society has been able to watch how it worked and that it worked well. So that's, so to say, an experiment in praxis. And not just with 500 people, but with 1 million people. The second thing, what I want to say is we're now building behind the scenes with the people in 2-3 political parties to put the basic income on a permanent basis in the national manifestos for our elections in a year's time. So that's the Greens, that's the left-wing Liberals, and that's the classical Social Democrats. At the same time, we have contact with people on the right-wing Liberals. There are individuals there also working for the same idea. So we hope to be able to be strong enough that it really becomes an issue at the next election, which is March next year, and at the next formation of the new government in Holland, that UBI will be an issue to be discussed, and probably and hopefully they will say, yes, we will step forward for introducing a UBI for everybody in Holland. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexander. Thank you for your contributions. Hilde, dear Hilde, would you like to continue?
As Alexander already explained about the Dutch situation, then I will answer your questions. You asked about, if we have to be careful in the discussions about basic income. No, I don't think we have to be careful. We have to be very persistent about the unconditionality. But I mean, basic income in the Netherlands, it's all over the place. It's on the radio, it's in the newspapers, on the television. All those initiatives from people unorganized come from everywhere, and that is the power of the masses, and that is why politicians will switch to basic income if the cry from the crowd is loud enough. And so we don't need to do any micromanagement on details. Just go for it. And when we are asked, we talk about unconditionality and things like that. But so the terminology of basic income, I think, after this crisis or during this crisis, more and more people will understand what the effect of basic income is or would be on their personal lives. There are so many people in financial trouble because of the measures taken against the coronavirus. And then your second question, if I recall it well, was about the period that we should demand for. Well, I mean, I think as we can easily predict that the effects of the measures taken are not going to be over within a few weeks after we open the societies again. So at least 6 months, and go from there. Thanks.
Thank you, Hilde. So, Karl, would you like to continue? Word is yours.
I think we have to be careful in the sense of being careful about our language. Is that some things are UBI, some things are not UBI. Some things that are not UBI are a lot closer to UBI than other things that are not UBI. Now, a lot of people are really tempted to take things that aren't UBI and put the name UBI in it because they're close to it. And that might get you something that's trying to sort of feed off the energy of the basic income movement for something kind of basic income like. The Canadian Basic Income Network is doing that now, promoting a negative income tax and calling it a UBI. But then that might help you in the short run, getting that put in. But in the long run, it can hurt you. If you try this and you're like, well, it had all these problems, and you're like, oh, well, that doesn't happen with a real UBI. You need to, from the beginning, say, well, that's not quite a UBI. Nice step in the direction. We need to be careful about that and when we talk about in our own countries, we need to talk about this is a good temporary UBI model. Like in the United States, something like $2,000 for an adult, $1,000 for a child for 4 months. That'd be a great model. $1,000 per person for 3 months or 2 months is not as good, but it's still a UBI. But if you're like, if you start adding some means testing or some other conditions, it's not a UBI even, but you should criticize for proposals like that, which is what we're going to get in most countries. I think we will get a true emergency UBI in some countries, but in most countries, we're going to get something close to a UBI. And those things need to be praised for the things that they do right, and they need to be criticized for what they do wrong. And UBI advocates really need to, in every country, need to be pointing out, this is how it differs from UBI, and this is also why it has this, that, and this problem. That's why this person didn't get help. And obvious things in defending against, well, arguments like, what do we need to give to high income people right now? Well, if you don't want high income people to be better off, you can raise their taxes. But actually, a lot of high income people are losing money right now and spending less. And this actually might encourage them to spend more. It's not a great time to raise taxes on anybody, but there are some taxes like rent taxes and resource taxes, taxes that hit specifically profits and not your normal return on capital and not your expenses, but taxes that really hit only profits, and that's possible to do. Those kind of taxes we can raise during a recession. Now, so if you really want to tax, you're really offended by this billionaire getting a $1,000 check, there are lots of ways to counteract that. But what's really important is to help those most in need and those most in crisis. It's really important both that somebody at the restaurant who lost their job gets this help, even if they're working only in cash on a gig basis. They need it because they have nothing. But it's also important that your grocery store employee and your nurses and doctors and orderlies and your lowest level person at the hospital, it's really important that they keep working as long as they're healthy, and they deserve this bonus as hazard pay and something with the extra problems they're dealing with in this crisis. Maybe the daycare center they use is closed, or the dog boarding center they use is closed. It could be a million things that they need in this crisis, not to mention they deserve some hazard pay. Those kind of arguments for why it's got to be unconditional, not just unemployment and not a means-tested thing. But even if something comes out that is not quite UBI, but is working in that direction, got to praise it for what it does right and criticize it for what it does wrong in all 200 countries on earth that are dealing with this now. Oh, and it's also, I should say, it's not just the coronavirus. In the US, and I think a lot of stock markets around the world, the US stock market lost 30% of its value in a month. That has never happened before. Not in 2008, not in 1929, the beginning of the Great Depression. Never happened before. That is on the long-term capitalized value of every corporation in America, or all the big ones. That's not just a reaction to what's going to be going on for a few months. That is some reaction to some underlying problem in the economy. Coronavirus is big, but this signals that there are other problems in the economy that are independent of coronavirus and might be exaggerated by coronavirus, but that this downturn is happening anyway. It's a twin crisis. It's both an economic crisis and a health crisis, and UBI helps for both of those in different ways.
Thank you, Karl. Enno, would you like to contribute? Dear Enno?
Yeah.
And the word is yours.
Yeah, I think, yeah, what we see is that there's still much more money going to capital than to people. But the idea that money can go to the people, that becomes stronger now. I think it's overestimated if people think, wow, we are very close to an introduction of an unconditional universal basic income now. Because, you know, that is what we all see. This is not the idea of an unconditional universal basic income, lifelong, high enough to live from for everybody. This is a different idea. Currently, it's driven by need. It's caused by this catastrophe. And often in history, catastrophes are pushing ideas forward, even if this is not exactly what we think is the idea. But that's how life is going, and that is how new ideas are coming in society. So I think we have a long way to argue and to fight for an unconditional basic income, but it becomes part of the life of the people. Many organizations like the Pen Club is claiming basic income for writers. There's a petition in Germany with more than 400,000 signatures right now, and in Switzerland there is one. There's a European EU petition about basic income. So look to that point that so many people who see that this kind of economy and this stories told to us are no longer working, and they need to be able to do something. And this crisis gives them an opportunity to do things. And they are doing it for unconditional basic income. They are doing it for looking to society. So this is life that is going on. And the coronavirus gives the opportunity that more of those ideas people are living with since a long time are coming out now. Even if this is not what will happen, because the people in power don't like an unconditional basic income, but this is more spreading now into society. And so many petitions are signed and so many organizations are talking about it. And as you mentioned all in the newspapers, people use the name UBI now. And this is new, like Karl mentioned in the beginning. And I think we are just on that way. We are on that run. And this crisis, and look to the results of the crisis, will be that more people went bankrupt and are unemployed or in a precarious situation. And I think this is the follow-up of the crisis is also that people have to rethink society, rethink work and economy. In this way, it's hard for many people, but in this way, I guess it's good for progress.
Thank you, Enno. Very kind of you. And next contribution, dear Helmo, would you like to continue, please?
Yeah, coming back to your questions, if you think we should be careful with the language or the concept of unconditional basic income, well, what I experience now in Austria, and maybe as a preface, we have a very strong and very traditional social security system. The idea of a basic income is now not regarded so much as a better form of social security or a better form of charity. Suddenly people realize that they can be in an emergency state as well. So just the other day, a major newspaper made an article about UBI, and the author, being an opponent, of course, was saying that the big counter argument was always how to finance it. And last week, our Minister of Finance made an emergency economic rescue package of, what was it, a 10% of GDP. So that's almost an unlimited check. And this author of the newspaper said, well, if you can suddenly get 10% of GDP out of the magician's hat, the argument of it cannot be financed might not be so solid. So experiencing that tells me that the discussion is moving forward. Most of the counter arguments are, you know, eroding. And I'm pretty sure we will get something like an emergency money, helicopter money, and something like that. That will come. But to get something out of it that is consistent, that is lifelong, guaranteed for all, high enough, and mostly unconditional, that will take some more years, because I don't think the government can get a top-down approach of an unconditional basic income without people demanding it. So it will not be a gift for us. We have to ask for it. So, and at least in Austria, the population is not so well informed yet to know what should it be asking for. So we're moving in the right direction, but I don't think that it will come very close. And we're, as an activist, I have something to show to you. We're trying to move on with the opinion building process. We are heading for a referendum end of next year, and it says here, unconditional basic income implemented, get it done. And yeah, so I think we're on a good way. Besides, we're now in an emergency, as sad as it is, but it will help us. Thank you.
Thank you, Helmo. And Sarath, our youngest senior UBI advocate, word is yours.
Well, I think in our statement, we now appeal to the government or presentation to the government. We said it should be 6 months, because that's the minimum I think is required to come back to your normal life. And I think we said 6 months, you have to give this amount of unconditional basic income. I don't know. Well, I think the movement is not something that we can engineer. You know, I feel that movement is a big picture, and it's much longer duration. I think 30 years ago, when they co-founded basic income Earth network or European network. I think they're expecting things to happen, but nothing happened till recently, and they were all very happy when things started happening. So I think history has its own course, and I think we have to be humble to do just what we have to do at this moment, each moment. I think before coronavirus, we were doing it. During coronavirus also, we are doing it. But I strongly believe that we have to keep doing something that we strongly believe, which is good for a large section of our society. And if we passionately keep talking about it, a lot of people tell me that the way you say it is more important. It convinces us than the philosophical ramifications and economic and all that. So a lot of people who listen to what you say, they believe or don't believe because either they trust you or they don't trust you, you know. So it's important that you keep passionately talking about something. Now the point is that we have been talking about it for a long time. Now this moment has come. This moment, my agenda is not to further the basic income movement. My concern is now, basic income is a solution, but what is the problem? We go back to the problem. The problem is about deprivation. We are depriving large sections of our society of very basic things. That's why we have adopted this great idea of unconditional basic income, because we don't want inspectors, because we generate enough wealth. We have to give, we can give, we are capable of giving. Politicians may not agree, but we are capable. So we focus on the people who are deprived. And today in Corona situation context, I think you have these huge masses. Like, for example, there are millions of people who are moving, who have shifted from one city to another to their native places, who are migrant workers. They have been staying in shanties on the street side to work in a city. They're all going back to their native place because they have no work in those cities. Now, all those people have to be addressed. So now the focus now is about how to address those people using this idea. And when we're talking to our governments, they seem to be listening, but they are not listening to the seriousness and the enormity of the situation. They're trying to use the very good old methods and trying to enhance those methods rather than take a radical departure from that and address what is to be done immediately. Now, our job now is to tell the governments that please address the immediacy of the situation. I think that's our role at the moment. Basic income movement will take its own course. I think with all people, so many wonderful people writing, talking, painting. You know, he's a painter. And all that, I think this will take the movement ahead. Of course, the movement will depend on as good as we are. I completely agree with what Karl has said, that, you know, everything is not UBI. Everything is not UBI, of course. That's why we don't even want to call it UBI at this juncture. We are just calling it emergency basic income. That's all. We are just using that energy which was already there. But we are not calling it UBI, because I'm also objecting to people who are calling it UBI, because this is not universal. It's not UBI. Sorry. I think there's lots to discuss.
Thank you very much. I would like to say one thing. Here, a survey have been conducted and the results were at the social media. And the question was, what are you more afraid of? A, COVID-19 virus, B, losing your job. And the result was the ratio of those who are worried about losing their jobs is more than those who are afraid of the virus. I mean, of course, this is something psychological, but it gives an idea. Does anybody would like to say last words? Otherwise, we will finalize our meeting. Alexander? Karl? Karl, and who else? Nobody else. Okay. Karl, what is your...
Ali, the very definition of precarious is that they can lose their job and income anytime. That's the precarity. That's the precariousness of their life. Are you going to lose your job is not the question. Have you lost it already? Or are you going to lose it tomorrow? That's the point. When there's a lockdown like the way we have it in India now, there are no jobs at all, nothing. Everything, the roads are empty. 1.3 billion people are sitting at home. That's the law. And as usual, the government wants to blame the individual for the transgression. We have done everything that is possible through a lockdown. If anything goes wrong, you as an individual who has not followed the rule, that is causing the spread of this virus. And I'm going to take a stick and hit you, put you in prison, and implicate you. I will not implicate myself as government for not providing testing facilities, not providing healthcare facilities, not taking action where it is needed. It's the regular game of the state that you blame the individual and not the system.
Thank you, Sarath. Karl, what is yours? And lastly, Helmo will say a few words.
I'm sorry.
Karl.
I just wanted to ask Enno if we could stay on after the meeting, because I had some questions about my speaking at his institute this summer. Nothing to do with the meeting.
Helmo?
Yeah, I think Sarath has put something very crucial into this meeting, because one of the core elements of universal basic income is that it separates the source of income and your job or your work a bit from each other. And now everybody, or almost everybody, is experiencing this. So this helps us a lot in giving a vivid example that what do you do if you're still there, but your job, is moving somewhere else, or is being automated, or is not there anymore because of a virus, or let's say something else. Wouldn't it be nice to have a permanent source of income, and you would be able to move wherever you're most needed in society? And that's a very helpful experience we're making now. That's what I wanted to add.
Thank you all. I am unmuting all. Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, so Enno, can I talk?
Yeah.
Sure, everybody can talk now.
Yes.